My guest today is Vijay Pitchuman, an accomplished product management leader. Vijay has a wealth of experience across a variety of roles, having been instrumental in driving technological innovation at various organizations. He is passionate about building high-performing teams and fostering a culture of continuous improvement. With a deep understanding of both the technical and business aspects of technology development, Vijay brings a unique perspective to the intersection of technology and business strategy. Thank you so much for being on the show with us, Vijay. It's a real honor to have you here.
Yeah, absolute pleasure being here and looking forward to the chat.
Great. So before we get going, can you maybe share a bit about your background and what inspired you to venture into the SaaS B2B space?
Yeah, of course. I'm a director of product at Okta right now. Been with Okta for about 6 years. Spent over a decade in cybersecurity overall. My first job was like literally an implementation consultant for VMware, which you might be familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was really my start into the B2B space. And then that was my gateway into cybersecurity as well, because we were doing email security products. And so that was like a really eye-opening moment for me where I was like, okay, there's huge potential, very critical industry. And that's been my journey throughout, where I've built my career around cybersecurity, building security products for organizations overall. Yeah.
Yeah, and so in particular, you work in identity management. So at a high level, can you tell us about what that is and why it's critical for organizations?
Yeah. So my role, and again, throughout my career, I've been focused on ensuring that any identities, like all of us, you, me, everyone is an identity, right? And all of us are identities that are trying to access critical applications and critical resources. And so when you think about cybersecurity for any organization, there are multiple tailwinds that are happening. So organizations are adopting more and more cloud applications and technologies. COVID happened. And so during COVID, really our work model shifted and we no longer go to offices. Remote hybrid work has become the new norm. And so when you put all of these together, really organizations are adopting a lot of cloud apps, cloud technologies to make their employee base productive. And really what identity management in a nutshell is controlling the keys to the kingdom. It's ensuring who can access what cloud applications, having the right guardrails in place so that only the right people can access the right time. And so really making sure how you solve that problem is what identity management is all about.
So yeah, I think you mentioned it. It's sort of historically the perimeter was maybe the secure wall that an organization would use to make sure everything internally was safe, meaning when you came into the office, you got onto the local LAN, which was secure, and that was enough to make sure you had access. But now everybody's distributed. We're using all these things in the public cloud. And so the identity of the person claiming that they have the rights to the different resources needs to be confirmed and managed. And that's essentially what you guys are doing.
Because, what you just explained is really identity is becoming the new perimeter, right? Because we don't have the corporate network infrastructure anymore. We don't have devices anymore because everyone's using multiple kinds of devices to access these systems. So really, how do you focus on protecting the identity from phishing attacks, from social attacks, to securely enable them to access these technologies is really what identity management is all about.
Okay, so I'm sure there's many, but what are some of the primary challenges that organizations see with identity management?
Yeah. When you think about it, I'm sure you might be familiar with this as well. Any organization, to protect their overall security posture. So think about how many cybersecurity tools they deploy, and think about all of the different technologies they adapt in making sure the organization is more productive across the board. Now, when you think about all of the data that is available, think about, data is so fragmented. You have your Active Directory, you might have your access management system, you might have your governance system, you might have your privileged access management system, you might have a network monitor. You have all of these different tools, and really from a data perspective, it's just extremely fragmented, right? And so in order for an organization to really make sure that you drive the right identity outcomes, you really want to make sure that each of these systems talk to each other and make sure that you have the right policies in place, the right rules in place to ensure identities can access the right technology. And so just the fragmentation is like a huge problem. I mean, that's I'm just calling out like one of the problems, right? Just from a core architecture perspective. So fragmentation is a big deal. Then if you really think about it from an identity perspective, it's really about how do you ensure that everyone's processing the right guardrails and only allowing the apps that they should have access to? Because like think about shadow access, rogue account access. Like how do people access new apps or new technologies that maybe you're not authorized to access? So how can the organization protect themselves from, that? So there are all of these challenges that just contribute towards identity management overall.
It sounds like it's a problem where policy meets technology enablement.
Exactly.
It's the two things wound up together.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what are some of the risks of not getting it right? What can go wrong if an organization isn't managing identity properly?
Yeah. I mean, like it's just making sure that only the right people access the corporate data, right? I mean, data breaches are a real big problem. I think I read this stat somewhere. I think it's the Verizon data breach report where around 80%, don't quote me on the number, but somewhere around 80% of all data breaches were caused because of like some overprivileged identity that has elevated privileges to a resource that they should not have access to.
Yeah.
So really like the catastrophic effect of this is just, okay, unauthorized people having access to data resulting in data breaches, and then all of the costs that come along with it. And so really getting this right is critical for any organization.
Yeah, I've heard a similar thing mentioned about long-lived API access tokens.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Does that fall under the umbrella of identity management as well?
Oh yeah. I mean, so think about it as two things, right? So the way we see identity management is human identity management, which is all of the human employees that we have, and then there's non-human identity management, which is like a really hard area that's coming up. And like think of an API token at the end of the day is really a non-human identity that can interact with another system and just transfer data between the two systems. And so protective long-lived tokens, adopting really more modern standards to have like a more frequent refresh token method is something that is extremely critical to get right.
Yeah, and I've talked to several guests about this specific problem, and one of the things that has come out of those conversations is that we don't even really audit the creation and life of these API tokens. They kind of get created by privileged users and then forgotten about, and there's no access.
And the worst part about that is those privileged users might usually not be tied to any single identity, because what ends up happening, so we call this typically as shared accounts. So what organizations do is, in order for systems to keep running and ensuring systems don't break if someone leaves the company, they create these generic accounts with a generic name that are tied to these API tokens that just keep running. And there's no auditing. These passwords are possibly stored in like, an Excel sheet somewhere. So it's like, that's a very big problem. Yes.
Yeah. And Luke Jennings, a fellow I talked to from a company called Push Security, he gives a talk on the new SaaS cyber kill chain. And he talks about, how threat actors will come in and the first thing they do is make another API token because their initial access will get removed when the team comes through and cleans up. But oftentimes there's no audit trail for all the different API tokens. So that's really interesting to know. I wasn't aware that API tokens also fell under identity management.
Yeah. I mean, so again, we classify this into two buckets, human and non-human identities, right? And so API tokens, protecting those privileged shared accounts, protecting secrets, they all fall under like the non-human identity bucket, which is something that,
Very cool. Are there any new trends or innovations in identity management worth mentioning? Like what should folks that work at organizations looking to improve their identity management be on the lookout for?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot that's happening, right? And one trend that I'm seeing in particular is just around eliminating some of these data silos and really rethinking like your approach towards deploying some of these identity management processes. So for example, if you roll back the years, like 10 years back or even 5 years ago, like I said, you would have one system for Active Directory. You would have a cloud access management system, which gives you single sign-on access. You might have a standalone governance system. You can have a standalone privileged access management system. So the one trend that I'm noticing is really there are newer vendors that are out there that are offering more of a unified platform or a converged platform offering where there's like a platform play where all of these capabilities are from like built in one platform that can work really well together. Now, why is this really interesting from an organization perspective is that it really unlocks you newer scenarios that were just not possible before. So now think about it in a way such that when you want to run your audit campaigns, like we talked about audits of privileged accounts, if you want to run an audit of, say, okay, who has access to this privileged account and when was the last time someone accessed this privileged account in the first place, getting that end-to-end data, previously you would have to connect 5 different systems, but now these platform vendors really offer this in a more unique way. So that's like a really interesting trend that at least I'm seeing from my vantage point. And in fact, even like Gartner validated this like a couple of years ago. They, you know how Gartner has a magic quadrant for
Yeah.
the traditional identity access management market. They used to have a separate magic quadrant for the governance market. And then Gartner actually retired the magic quadrant for access management. And they said, hey, moving forward, it's all going to be bundled into the traditional access management market quadrant, right? So there's a lot. So this is like a very clear trend that we're seeing. And so more and more, like, you know, as like CIOs, CISOs think about their security overall, I think this is a trend we'll definitely start to see more come out.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Along with identity management, you're also a product management
Yeah.
leader. Your job is to help ship new cybersecurity products to help organizations stay ahead of the bad guys. What are some of the unique challenges you've encountered when shipping products in the cybersecurity space compared to, you know, the regular
Yeah.
civilian market, we'll call it?
Yeah. I mean, it's about getting security right. Like really, when you think about it from a customer perspective, it's really important that we ship products that work end to end and really make sure that we drive the right security outcomes. And so proving value out from a customer perspective is really important because one of the biggest challenges with historically security products has been it's just such a heavy lift to deploy, like get value out of it, and it just takes a long time. It's just super complicated. And so one of the things that, you know, at least I've essentially had as a trend that I've seen through my career is this: the value in cybersecurity product really lies in the fact that how do we make it simple for customers to deploy and make it easy to get more time, more value out of it. And like if we get that balance right, I think cybersecurity products, you can really ship really high quality, high valuable cybersecurity products. Like, I mean, like that's really a trending. You can see this theme across so many of these newer vendors. I'm pretty sure, I guarantee you'll see a value prop of, oh, faster time to market. And like that's really like a common theme that you're going to see across a lot of these vendors out there.
Yeah, that's actually one of our value props.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so faster time to value is like
Yeah.
really important, right? And so that is something because historically customers have really struggled with it.
Yeah.
And so even today, like when I go talk to customers from an Okta perspective, we keep hearing customers who are like, hey, I'm stuck with my old technology. I've been having it for the last 10 years. I've not gotten any value out of it. Help me modernize. And that's really a common theme that we also see across the board. And so, yeah.
Very cool. So in this process of shipping these products that provide value very quickly to customers, how do you ensure alignment between engineering, sales, go-to-market teams, and all the other people involved in product launch?
Yeah, I mean, trust me about it. As a PM, it's really important to drive this alignment, right? Because I mean, so especially when you ship new products from a cybersecurity perspective, it's really important that you land your first 50, 100 customers as you go, right? And when you think about it, you are not going to be solving every single security use case out of the box. So like, for example, I led a new governance product for Okta. And then when we went to market, obviously we were compared with all of the existing governance vendors that were out there. And, you know, we did not have, or we don't intend to have like feature parity with every single vendor. But that meant needed to have a strong strategy on, okay, who are our target customers, who's the right target customer segment, who's the right audience, who are the right kind of customers that we want to target. And so clearly articulating these things and making sure your sales team is bought in and your engineering, your product leadership is all bought in is extremely important, because like you cannot get a new product to launch without a sales team backing you. Like the sales team are like your best friends when it comes to really making sure that, we get products out. So yeah.
So initially you're looking for a smaller scoped problem that you can solve very well, that provides a
Yes.
lot of value to a specific group of people, and then from there you kind of
Yeah,
iterate and grow and start taking on new problems and stuff like
exactly.
that. Yeah.
Exactly. Because like, I mean, if you run into the trouble of, you will never end up shipping the product if you just want to solve every single problem,
Yeah.
right?
It sounds a lot like a startup, except you just run out of money and go
Exactly.
bankrupt. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So yeah.
Very cool. Is there, well, so I'm gonna skip that one. Can you discuss the role of early adopters? I think you mentioned, those first 1,500 are super important.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I guess, sorry, I'm gonna have to cut this out because it's just feeding off of the same one. So
No.
I'll skip ahead to the, yeah, we kind of answered it in our our follow up, but that's okay. I'll cut it out. Um, so balancing security with user experience can be tricky. Can you share some best practices for achieving this balance? Like, how do you go
Yeah.
about figuring out what's important?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when you ship any security products, I think it's really important and it becomes absolutely critical to balance both security and user experience, right? Because ultimately, the users of your security product might not only be IT administrators, but also like the end users who interact with your product. And if the goal is to really ensure that you want to protect every single identity out there, then it's really important that you balance security and uh, the end user experience. So there are so many new innovations that have happened. I can talk about a couple in the identity management space. So one of the things that have really happened is, and you might be familiar with this too, which is the passwords have been the most critical way of, or like critical threat vector of how identities have been historically attacked. And so how do we get rid of the passwords? How do we make sure that, customers can really try to authenticate systems while proving who their identities are in a truly passwordless manner?
Hmm.
And so we call it phishing resistant internally. So how do we ensure that customers use phishing resistant factors to really access any technology? And that significantly comes with a good end user experience, but also a high security posture, because you no longer have to have your password or your traditional 16-digit phrase that you use to set passwords to meet minimum requirements, right?
Yeah.
So you don't need any of that.
Yeah.
So it really comes with a lot of high security like outcomes while also balancing end user experience. So that's like one real innovation that's happening. Then the other real innovation that I'm seeing happening, at least in like identity management, is really more around how do we leverage these modern technologies and tools to interact with IT. So, for example, I mean, I'm sure you might be familiar with this, which is in like traditional IT. You know how you email your IT teams to be like, hey, I need access to something, and then you don't hear from them for the next 3 days, and then suddenly you're like, okay, because I mean, fair play to them, they're like just
Yeah.
it's a 2-3% team who's just like
Sure, but
burdened.
that's also where the bad security workarounds come from, right? This
Exactly.
is this is where, okay, well, I'm not getting the answer I want, so I'm going to go in through the side
Exactly.
door, and yeah.
Exactly. So, how do you build systems that eliminate that friction and make it very easy for end users to interact with IT teams? So, how do you make it through Slack? So, like, there's a ton of Slack bots that are coming about in terms of figuring out, okay, Slack, Teams, like, how do you make it more modern, and
Hmm.
how do you also make it more continuous, right? To ensure that you have the right level of access. I can just ask someone in Slack, and then someone's immediately responding, okay, you can get access. And there's like an automatic workflow
Yeah.
that goes and gives them access. So how do you, again, this is where security and end user experience really comes together. And so just sharing a couple of examples on how these are the kind of things that are very important to get right.
Is there anything that you do to stay ahead of the curve and ensure your thinking around products remains competitive? Everything's evolving so fast.
Yeah.
Is there resources or blogs or anything that you could share?
Yeah, I mean, podcast is a good avenue. So listening to a lot of podcasts just to hear what people are thinking, people are saying, it just shows
Yep.
out the raw emotions, right? So podcast is generally a very good avenue. I mean, I usually, yeah, read a lot, talk to customers, right? Like that's the really the main thing in terms of just, and like I actually have like solid 1 or 2 hours that are blocked every single week that are just dedicated. Even if I don't have any customer calls, I will make sure that at least that's the minimum that I have every week to make sure that I go and talk to customers, right? And so the more customers you talk to, the more you're going to get a sense of, okay, here are the problems they're facing, here's what's
Hmm.
happening. And then that's how you really stay up to speed on, okay, here are the opportunities for you to go and innovate, right? Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, you've talked about so many things that sound exactly like an early stage startup, and I think talking to
Yeah.
customers is super important because you want to feel their pain, right?
Totally. And
Yeah.
you want to live what they are experiencing. So that's like a really big disconnect. Like as a PM, like I mean, I can't share it in the screen or something, but if you look at like some of the orgs that I have, just Okta tenants, I try to mimic customer environments as much as possible so that I can any new feature that we ship, we're like, okay, let's click through every single way how a customer would use this or interact with this. And then feeling that pain is really important and sharing that empathy
Hmm.
is really important to make sure we get the product right.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Do you have any lessons you can share from, I'm interested in the successful product launches, but more interested in the unsuccessful product
oh
launches. Like,
yeah,
what are the hard won lessons that you have?
yeah. Sometimes like I mean, the hard lessons I've had is sometimes past biases can just be our own enemy.
Hmm.
And so, like, I've made mistakes in the past where, like, okay, hey, I've talked to these customers, I've just assumed so many things. And then I'm like, okay, I know this is the problem. I don't want to go and talk to customers and then understand. And then you spend up all this time, and then the customers are like, yeah, that used to be a problem 2 years ago. We've solved this now, and this is no longer a problem, right?
Yeah.
And like that's really something. So this is where, especially from a security perspective, because security is just so critical for every organization, IT teams always find a way, customers
Hmm.
always find a way to do it.
Hmm.
And really your main competition comes from the incumbent, which is, okay, how are customers doing it? Right. And if they found a way internally where they've spent time and money and effort to really write your scripts or like do something in-house, you're competing with their emotions at that point. It's like,
Right.
I've spent so much time and effort building this.
Right.
And so that is where I think it's really important to understand like the overall end-to-end goal. So like, I mean, this is where I personally made mistakes and something I'm like, I mean, no one's perfect, but like something I'm always wanting to learn more.
Do you have any advice for product professionals who are grappling with the challenges of going from 0 to 1?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so 0 to 1 is always interesting. I mean, think of it as you can do this as a startup, you can do this as a big company as well. But when you really think about 0 to 1 products, my one advice would be extremely comfortable saying no,
Mhm.
because you will be tempted to go in 50 different directions because there might be this one customer that comes in and be like, hey, I'm going to give you $1 million. And then, but you would have to take the product in a direction which you never intended to take. But that $1 million could be like a make or break.
Mhm.
And so I think it's really important to have that conviction in how you're going to disrupt the market and how do you make sure that you don't let your product roadmap or your product vision be like disrupted by 1 or 2 customers,
Mhm.
right? That's been my biggest learning, which is both in successful and unsuccessful launches. Like that's been like some of the learnings we've had, which is the more diligent you are in targeting the right customer segments, targeting the right cohort of customers, making sure that you go down the journey, I think the more successful you would be. Of course, like we have to validate as we go to make sure that's the right direction. But yeah, that would be my recommendation. Be
Uh,
comfortable saying no.
yeah, and I love that advice. I know early on with us, it was there was a couple times where we had a similar thing where there was a
Yeah,
potential big customer, but they really wanted to have some influence on the direction of the product development, which
totally.
didn't align with the long term vision. And it's like it's really hard to say no to that
Yeah,
when you're cash strapped and looking at the
100%.
check. But I'm so glad we did it. It's really what's kept us on the road to the big vision, right?
100%. It's super tough. I mean, I might come across as making it sound easy. It is super tough. I have so much empathy for everyone who's gone through this journey. It's like really tough, but it works. It's really impactful.
All right. So this is the last one I have for you. It's the one I ask of everybody who comes on the show.
Yeah.
It can be as wide or as narrow as you want. Do you have any predictions for the future of cybersecurity?
I mean, I think it's going to get more and more tough. That's I mean, so think about AI is a big thing. I don't think we talked about AI or hit upon AI much, but just like there's going to be AI that we can leverage to protect organizations from security threats, attackers are going to leverage AI to make it more and more sophisticated to come and attack.
Yeah.
Right. And so we are going to see more and more evolutions of just cybersecurity attacks just maturing into newer patterns. And it's really, really going to be critical in ensuring that we build the right products, the right capabilities, and really, making sure we are ready for the future. I'm calling it a race. It's really coming down to, okay, is it the good guys or the bad guys? Who's going to go first?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you might be helping to define a new category of identity here too, right? Are we going to have a third class of identity for AIs?
Yeah, exactly. And especially if you think about AI, one thing that's really interesting is we talked about cloud adoption. We talked about how customers are using more and more cloud applications. AI is just going to accelerate that. Imagine all of the cloud adoption that's going to increase with AI. Who's going to protect all of your different LLMs that are going to access your data? Who's going to protect all of the databases where you're going to host all of this data? How do you ensure that only the right people get access to? It's going to bring a newer class of problems that's going to come up, right? And it's going to be really interesting how that space evolves over time.
Yeah, there will be no shortage of work to do in the future.
Oh, totally. That's for sure. Yes.
Awesome, Vijay. Thanks so much for joining me on the show today. It was really great getting to know you. Thanks for reaching out. And hopefully we'll get a chance to talk again in the future.
Of course. Yeah, super. Absolute pleasure chatting. Thank you so much.
Take care, sir. Bye.
Yeah.